Widow cried as her house sank. But the water revealed a valuable secret. Sarah Mitchell trembled as she held her youngest daughter's hand and watched the muddy waters slowly swallowing her modest two-bedroom house. At 28 years old, widowed for 8 months, she faced alone the responsibility of raising 10-year-old Brandon, 8-year-old Emily, and little Olivia, just 5. The flood that hit the Riverside neighborhood in Springfield had begun the previous dawn, but it was when the sun rose golden between the heavy clouds that Sarah realized the true scale of the tragedy. It wasn't just the loss of the house that tormented her, but the despair of seeing disappear underwater the little that remained of the life she had built with Marcus, her late husband. "Mommy, is the water going to take our whole house?" asked Olivia, squeezing the cloth doll Marcus had sewn for her months before he passed. Sarah couldn't answer. Her savings had already run out from funeral expenses and the medical bills accumulated during her husband's long hospitalization. The house insurance had expired 3 months prior, and she hadn't been able to renew it for lack of money. Now, watching the roof of the house gradually disappear, she felt as if she were losing Marcus for a second time. "Look over there, Mom!" shouted Brandon, pointing at something emerging from the water in the small backyard. Sarah wiped her tears and focused her gaze in the direction her son indicated. Among the floating debris and vegetation dragged by the current, a dark metal structure was being revealed by the force of the water eroding the ground. It looked like an old safe, the kind her grandfather used to have at home decades ago. Sarah's heart raced. Marcus had never mentioned burying anything in the yard. During their 5 years of marriage, she knew every inch of that property, or at least thought she did. Why would her husband hide something from her? And more importantly, what could be inside that safe? "Children, stay here with Mrs. Dorothy," Sarah said to the elderly neighbor who had offered shelter to the family. "I need to check something." "Sarah, dear, don't go into that water, it's dangerous," protested Mrs. Dorothy, a white-haired lady who had lived in the house next door for over 40 years. But Sarah was already walking toward the muddy water, feeling the icy liquid rise up her legs as she approached the mysterious object. The current wasn't strong in that area, and the safe seemed firmly anchored to the ground by its own roots of rusty metal. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. With trembling hands, Sarah managed to touch the metal surface of the safe. It was larger than it had seemed from a distance, about 50 centimeters wide, with an old lock that showed signs of rust, but still seemed functional. It was partially buried, as if Marcus had dug a specific hole for it and then covered it with dirt and vegetation. Questions multiplied in her mind as she tried to move the heavy object. Why had Marcus hidden this from her? When had he done it? And most importantly, would there be something valuable enough inside the safe to help her rebuild her children's lives? "Sarah!" a familiar voice shouted behind her. She turned and saw Jennifer, Marcus's sister-in-law, walking hurriedly toward her. Jennifer had always shown a certain coldness toward Sarah, especially after her marriage to Marcus. Her presence at that specific moment seemed odd, considering she hadn't even appeared during the most difficult days after the funeral. "Jennifer, what are you doing here?" asked Sarah, trying to disguise her nervousness. "I heard about the flood on television and came to see if you all were okay." "My God, what a terrible situation," replied Jennifer, but her eyes were fixed on the safe Sarah had just discovered. "What is that?" Sarah hesitated before answering. Something in Jennifer's expression warned her to be careful. During the years of marriage, she had noticed that her sister-in-law always showed excessive interest in Marcus's financial affairs, asking questions about salaries, savings, and investments in a way that made her uncomfortable. "I don't know, I just found it. The water must have unearthed it," replied Sarah, trying to sound casual. "Interesting. Marcus never mentioned burying anything there. Are you sure it's yours?" asked Jennifer, moving closer to the water. The question deeply irritated Sarah. Of course, the safe was theirs. It was in the yard of their property, revealed by the flood that had destroyed their home. Why would Jennifer question that? "Of course it's ours, Jennifer. It's on our land," replied Sarah more firmly now. Of course. It's just that Marcus sometimes stored things for other people too." "You know how helpful he was," said Jennifer, but her tone suggested there was more behind that remark. Sarah felt a chill in her stomach that had nothing to do with the icy water around her feet. Was there something Jennifer knew and wasn't telling? Did Marcus really store things for other people? Why had she never known about this? "Jennifer, if you know anything about this safe, you need to tell me now," said Sarah, looking directly into her sister-in-law's eyes. "I don't know anything specific. It's just, Marcus was sometimes reserved about certain matters. Maybe it's better not to touch this until you understand better what it is," replied Jennifer, avoiding direct eye contact. At that moment, Mrs. Dorothy arrived at the water's edge, carrying an old rope. "Dear, I found this in my shed. It might help pull that thing," said the neighbor, handing the rope to Sarah. "Mrs. Dorothy, did you know Marcus had buried something here?" asked Sarah as she tied the rope to the safe. The elderly woman's expression changed subtly, as if an old memory had been stirred. "Now that you mention it, about 3 months before Marcus got sick, I saw him digging in the dirt back here, in the middle of the night. I thought he was planting something to surprise you," said Mrs. Dorothy, looking thoughtfully at the safe. "In the middle of the night," repeated Sarah, surprised. Marcus had always been a creature of regular habits, going to bed early and waking up on time for work. "Yes, indeed. About 2 or 3 times I woke up to the sound of a shovel digging. At the time I thought it was strange, but Marcus was always very respectful, so I didn't want to ask anything," explained the neighbor. Sarah felt the weight of the revelation. Marcus had deliberately hidden something from her, working in the middle of the night so she wouldn't notice. Why? They shared everything, or at least she thought they did. What kind of secret could be so important it needed to be buried in the backyard? With the help of the rope and the combined effort of the 3 women, they managed to drag the safe to a drier area. The object was heavy, suggesting there was something significant inside. The lock, despite the rust, seemed intact, but it would obviously need a key. "Did Marcus leave any keys stored somewhere special?" asked Jennifer, and Sarah noticed that her sister-in-law seemed overly anxious to get that information. "All his keys are on the keychain that stayed with me," replied Sarah, but mentally she was making a list of all the places where Marcus could have hidden an additional key. Meanwhile, the children watched everything from a distance, staying close to each other, as Marcus had always taught them to do in times of uncertainty. Brandon, the oldest, wore the same serious expression his father used to have when facing problems. Emily held her younger sister's hand, taking on the protective role she had developed since their father's departure. "Mommy, what's inside?" asked Emily, approaching timidly. "We don't know yet, sweetheart. I need to find the key first," replied Sarah, stroking her daughter's hair. "Did Daddy save something for us?" asked Olivia, with the innocence of a 5-year-old. The youngest daughter's question echoed in Sarah's heart, like a deep pain. Had Marcus really saved something for the family, or was there another explanation for that buried safe? "Maybe he did, dear. We'll find out together," answered Sarah, trying to sound optimistic, despite the confusion of emotions overwhelming her. Jennifer watched the whole family interaction, with an expression Sarah couldn't completely decipher. There was interest, anxiety, and perhaps something close to envy or resentment. "Sarah, I need to go now, but if you need help opening that, or if you discover there are legal matters involved, you can call me. I have some contacts that might be useful," said Jennifer, handing over a business card Sarah didn't know she had. After Jennifer left, Sarah was alone with the children, Mrs. Dorothy, and that mysterious safe that promised answers but also generated more questions. The elderly neighbor offered her house as temporary shelter, and Sarah gratefully accepted, knowing she would need time to process everything she had discovered. That night, after settling the children to sleep in the guest room of Mrs. Dorothy's house, Sarah stayed in the kitchen, looking at the safe they had carried inside. The yellow light from the lamp created dramatic shadows on the darkened metal, making the object even more mysterious. "Marcus, what secret were you keeping from me?" she whispered to herself, running her fingers over the safe's cold surface. Mrs. Dorothy appeared in the kitchen, carrying 2 cups of tea. "Dear, I know you're confused, but remember one thing. Marcus loved you and these children more than life itself. "If he hid something, he must have had a good reason," said the elderly woman sitting beside Sarah. "But why didn't he tell me? We were partners in everything," Sarah vented, feeling the tears return to her eyes. Sometimes men think they're protecting the family when they keep certain responsibilities to themselves. "It might be that Marcus wanted to make sure something would work out before sharing it with you," suggested Mrs. Dorothy, with the wisdom of someone who had lived many decades. Sarah sipped the hot tea and tried to organize her thoughts. She needed to find that key, but she also needed to be prepared for what she might discover. What if it was something that completely changed her perception of Marcus? What if there were hidden debts instead of treasures? What if Jennifer's suspicion had merit, and that safe really wasn't hers? "Mrs. Dorothy, you knew Marcus well. He was an honest person, wasn't he?" asked Sarah, seeking reassurance. "Marcus was one of the most upright men I've ever known, dear. If there was any secret, you can be sure it was to protect you, not to harm you," the elderly woman replied with conviction. Those words brought some comfort, but Sarah knew the only way to get real answers would be to find the key and open that safe. As she finished her tea, she began mentally planning all the places where Marcus could have hidden a key: his car that had been sold after his passing, the toolbox still stored in the back room of his mother-in-law's house, or perhaps among the books he loved to read so much. The search would begin the next day, but Sarah had a feeling that opening that safe would change her life forever. It remained to be seen whether it would be for better or for worse. The next morning, Sarah woke up early, determined to begin her search for the mysterious key. The floodwaters had receded considerably overnight, leaving only a layer of brown mud covering everything that was once her home. The house was destroyed, but at least now she could try to salvage some personal belongings. "Mom, can I go with you?" asked Brandon during the breakfast that Mrs. Dorothy had prepared. "It's still dangerous, son. There's a lot of mud and debris. You stay here and look after your sisters," replied Sarah, putting on the rubber boots borrowed from the neighbor. "But I can help look for Dad's things," insisted the boy, showing the forced maturity he had developed since becoming the man of the house. Sarah hesitated. Brandon really knew his father's habits better than his younger sisters. Marcus had always included his eldest son in his activities, teaching him about tools, household repairs, and male responsibilities. "All right, but you stay close to me at all times." "No separating," agreed Sarah, realizing her son needed to be part of that search. They walked together to the wreckage of the house. The smell of dampness and mud filled the air, mixed with the odor of soaked furniture and spoiled food. The refrigerator had toppled over, the sofa was unrecognizable under the layer of sediment, and the bedrooms were a jumble of wet clothes and personal belongings, scattered by the force of the water. "Mom, Dad's secret hiding place," exclaimed Brandon suddenly, pointing to what remained of the master bedroom closet. "What secret hiding place?" asked Sarah, surprised. "Dad showed me once. He said every man needed a special place to keep important things," explained Brandon, moving carefully through the debris. Sarah followed her son to the back of the destroyed closet. Brandon pointed to a board that looked slightly different from the others, with small nails that didn't match the rest of the structure. "He kept important papers here. He said it was for emergencies," continued the boy, trying to move the board with his small hands. With the help of an improvised tool, Sarah managed to remove the board and revealed a small secret compartment. Inside, protected by a sealed plastic bag, was a thick envelope, and to her immense joy, a small keychain with 2 old keys. "Brandon, you're a genius," said Sarah, hugging her son emotionally. When they opened the envelope, they found documents Sarah had never seen before. There were bank deposit receipts, proof of investments with a brokerage she didn't even know existed, and several notes in Marcus's careful handwriting about emergency reserves and the children's future. "Mom, what does all this mean?" asked Brandon, looking at the papers curiously. "It means your father was preparing to take care of us, even after he was gone," replied Sarah, her voice choked with emotion. Among the documents, there was a sealed letter addressed to Sarah, in case something happens to me. With trembling hands, she opened the envelope and began to read the words written by the hand of the man she loved. "My dear Sarah, if you are reading this letter, it means something has happened to me, and you are probably facing financial difficulties. Forgive me for not telling you about these savings and investments earlier. I wanted to be sure it would work out before raising expectations. In the safe buried in the backyard, you will find documents for all the investments I've made over the last 3 years, plus some cash for emergencies." Sarah stopped reading, breathless. Marcus had been planning for the family's future without her knowledge. All those early mornings awake, which she thought were work-related insomnia, he had spent studying investments and planning the family's financial security. "Brandon, let's go back to Mrs. Dorothy's house. I need to open that safe," said Sarah, carefully putting away all the documents. Back at the neighbor's house, Sarah positioned one of the keys from the keychain in the safe's lock. The key turned with a satisfying click, and the heavy lid opened, revealing the organized interior of the safe. Inside were folders labeled in Marcus's handwriting: Emergency Savings Account, Certificate of Deposit Investments, ExxonMobil Stocks, Life Insurance, Documents, and a larger folder titled Plan for the Children's Future. Sarah felt her legs go weak. There was money there, far more money than she had ever imagined they had. Marcus had been incredibly careful and strategic, diversifying investments and creating multiple safety nets for the family. "My God, Marcus," she whispered, picking up a bundle of cash that was set aside for immediate emergencies. Mrs. Dorothy, who had been watching discreetly from the kitchen door, approached with an emotional smile. "I knew Marcus was special. That man truly loved you all," said the elderly woman, wiping away a tear. But Sarah's joy was interrupted by the sound of the doorbell. When Mrs. Dorothy opened the door, Jennifer entered with a man in a suit whom Sarah did not know. "Sarah, I need to speak with you. This is Attorney Richard, the family lawyer," said Jennifer, in a much more serious tone than the day before. "Good morning, Mrs. Mitchell. I'm here because Mrs. Jennifer informed me about the discovery of assets that may be related to complex legal matters," said the lawyer, looking directly at the open safe. Sarah felt a chill in her stomach. Why had Jennifer brought a lawyer? And why was she acting as if there was some legal problem? "What legal matters?" "This safe was buried in my backyard, with documents in my husband's name," replied Sarah, trying to stay calm. "I understand, but I need to inform you that some of these investments may be under investigation by the Internal Revenue Service. Marcus made financial transactions that drew the attention of the authorities before he passed away," explained the lawyer, taking a folder from his briefcase. Sarah's heart raced. An Internal Revenue Service investigation. Marcus involved in something irregular. This couldn't be true. "That's impossible. Marcus was an honest person. He would never get involved in anything illegal," protested Sarah. "I'm not saying anything illegal occurred, Mrs. Mitchell. But financial transactions above certain amounts are always monitored, and when a person passes away during an investigation, the assets can be frozen until the process is concluded," explained the lawyer in a professional tone. Jennifer watched Sarah's reaction with an expression that mixed concern and something that seemed like satisfaction. "Sarah, I was trying to protect you. That's why I brought Attorney Richard. If you try to access these investments now, you could face serious problems," said her sister-in-law. "But this is my family's money. Can't I use it to rebuild our lives?" asked Sarah, feeling desperation grow again. "For now, the recommendation is not to touch anything until the situation is clarified. I can help you with the legal procedures, but it will be a lengthy process," replied the lawyer. Sarah looked at the open safe, at the money that had represented hope for a few hours, and then at Brandon, who was watching everything without fully understanding but sensing that something was wrong. "How long could this process take?" asked Sarah, trying to control the tremor in her voice. "Tax investigations can take from 6 months to 2 years, depending on the complexity," replied the attorney. 2 years. Sarah couldn't wait 2 years. She had no home, no money, and now she was discovering that the resources left by Marcus might be inaccessible for an indefinite time. "Attorney Richard, is there any way to access at least a portion of these resources? For basic needs?" asked Mrs. Dorothy, noticing Sarah's despair. "In exceptional cases, it's possible to request a partial release for subsistence, but that would be an additional process that also takes a few months," explained the attorney. Jennifer approached Sarah and placed a hand on her shoulder in an apparently supportive gesture. "Sarah, I know it's difficult, but I can help you and the children financially while this gets sorted out. In return, we could formalize a partnership regarding these investments, since Marcus was my brother and I have inheritance rights too," proposed the sister-in-law. Sarah felt as if the ground were disappearing beneath her feet again. Jennifer had inheritance rights to Marcus's investments. Was that possible? "What inheritance rights? Marcus was my husband and the children are his," questioned Sarah, her voice louder than she intended. "In the United States, siblings have inheritance rights when there's no specific will, especially if some assets were acquired before the marriage," explained the attorney, consulting his papers. "Marcus and I were married under a partial community property regime. Everything he acquired during the marriage is rightfully mine," countered Sarah, remembering the guidance she had received at the time of the wedding. "Yes, but some of these investments date from before the marriage, and others were made with funds whose origin needs to be proven," the attorney argued back. Sarah sat down heavily on the kitchen chair, feeling the weight of a situation that grew more complicated by the minute. What had started as a hopeful discovery was turning into a legal nightmare. "Mommy, is everything okay?" asked Emily, appearing in the kitchen holding Olivia's hand. Sarah forced a smile for her daughters, but inside she felt as if she was sinking again, only this time in bureaucracy and legal complications instead of floodwater. "Yes, sweetheart, we're just talking about grown-up things," replied Sarah, drawing her daughters close. Jennifer observed the family scene, and her expression seemed to soften slightly. "Sarah, my proposal isn't to harm you. It's to resolve this in a way where everyone benefits. You get immediate stability for the children, and I help sort out the legal matters," said the sister-in-law in a softer tone. "I need time to think," replied Sarah, feeling too pressured to make such an important decision right then. "Of course, but don't take too long. Situations like this tend to get even more complicated with time," warned the attorney, gathering his papers. After Jennifer and the attorney left, Sarah was alone in the kitchen with Mrs. Dorothy, the children, and that safe which had represented hope and now seemed to be the source of even more problems. "Mrs. Dorothy, what do you think? Can I trust Jennifer?" asked Sarah, seeking the wisdom of the elderly neighbor. "Dear, in 50 years of life I've learned one thing. When someone shows up with very quick solutions to complex problems, it's good to be suspicious. Jennifer may be sincere, but she could also be taking advantage of your vulnerability," Mrs. Dorothy replied honestly. "But if I don't accept her proposal, I could go years without being able to access this money," Sarah pondered. "That's true, but there might also be other ways to resolve this. Have you tried finding an independent attorney for a second opinion?" suggested the elderly woman. Sarah realized she hadn't. She only had the word of the attorney brought by Jennifer, which was obviously not impartial. She needed independent legal guidance, but how could she pay for it if she had no resources? "I don't have money to hire another attorney," admitted Sarah. "There's the Public Defender's Office, dear. It's free and should give you honest guidance about your rights," reminded Mrs. Dorothy. It was true. Sarah had completely forgotten about the Public Defender's Office. In the emotional turmoil of the last few days, she hadn't thought to seek free and impartial legal guidance. "Tomorrow, I'll go to the Public Defender's Office. I need to better understand my rights before making any decision," decided Sarah, feeling a bit more in control of the situation. That night, after putting the children to sleep, Sarah stayed awake, reading and rereading all the documents found in the safe and the secret hiding spot in the closet. The more she read, the more she realized that Marcus had been extremely organized and careful with the investments. There were detailed notes about each application, proof of origin for the invested funds, all coming from his salary as an electronics technician, and even a small diary where he recorded his hopes for the family's future. One note in particular caught her attention. "Sarah deserves security. The children deserve better opportunities than I had. Every dollar invested today is a step toward the future they deserve." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes again. Marcus had truly done everything out of love, not greed or any questionable motivation. How could anyone suggest there were irregularities in these investments? The next morning, Sarah arrived at the Public Defender's Office early, bringing all the documents organized in a folder. The public defender who assisted her, a young and competent woman named Attorney Karen, carefully examined each paper. "Mrs. Mitchell, from the documents I see here, there's nothing to indicate irregularities. Your husband was very organized, kept all the proof of origin for the funds, and the investments are within normal legal parameters," said Attorney Karen after a thorough analysis. "But the attorney who came with my sister-in-law said there was an Internal Revenue Service investigation," explained Sarah. "I need to verify that officially. Internal Revenue Service investigations are recorded, and I can check if there really is any pending matter in your husband's name," replied the defender, taking notes. "And what about the sister-in-law's inheritance rights?" asked Sarah, worried. "Under a partial community property regime and with minor children, the spouse is entitled to 50% of the assets acquired during the marriage, and the children split the other 50%. Siblings would only have rights if there were no spouse or descendants, which is not the case," explained Attorney Karen clearly. Sarah felt immense relief. The information from Jennifer's attorney did not match what the defender was explaining. "Attorney, is it possible the attorney was lying?" asked Sarah, still processing the information. "There may have been a misunderstanding in interpretation, or, unfortunately, some people try to take advantage of widows in vulnerable situations. That's why it's always important to seek a second opinion," replied Attorney Karen diplomatically. "What should I do now?" asked Sarah. "First, I'll make the official inquiries about any tax investigation. Second, I'll prepare the probate documents to legally formalize your rights to the assets. And third, I'll guide you on how to proceed if your sister-in-law insists on making improper claims," explained the public defender, demonstrating professional efficiency. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, Sarah left the public defender's office with a very different feeling from the one she had when she entered. For the first time in days, she felt there was someone competent and honest by her side, fighting for her rights and those of the children. On her way back to Mrs. Dorothy's house, her phone rang. It was Jennifer. "Sarah, how are you? I thought a lot last night about your situation. How about we talk more about my proposal? I can increase the amount of the monthly help I offered," said Jennifer with a seemingly concerned tone. "Jennifer, before we talk about any agreement, I need to clarify a few things. Can you explain more about this Internal Revenue Service investigation?" asked Sarah, now more confident thanks to the defender's guidance. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Well, actually, it was Attorney Richard who mentioned that possibility. I might have misunderstood," replied Jennifer, her voice less assured. "And what about the inheritance rights you mentioned?" continued Sarah. "Look, Sarah, I really don't understand much about these legal matters. Attorney Richard was the one who explained it, but there might have been some confusion," admitted Jennifer, clearly uncomfortable. Sarah realized her suspicions were justified. Jennifer had tried to create a situation of urgency and dependency to force an agreement favorable to herself. "Jennifer, I think it's better we leave the legal matters for after I get proper guidance. If you really want to help, you can do so without expecting anything in return," said Sarah, maintaining a firm but respectful tone. Of course. It's just, times are tough for everyone, and I thought we could help each other," replied Jennifer, inadvertently revealing her financial motivations. After ending the call, Sarah reflected on how close people could try to take advantage in moments of vulnerability. Jennifer had probably seen an opportunity to gain access to Marcus's investments through her emotional and financial fragility. Back at Mrs. Dorothy's house, Sarah found the children playing in the backyard with an impressive sense of normalcy, considering all they had been through. The children's ability to adapt always surprised and inspired her. "Mum, Mrs. Dorothy said we might be able to stay here a few more days. Is that true?" asked Brandon, hope in his voice. "Yes, son, and it seems things are going to work out better than I imagined," replied Sarah, hugging her oldest child. "Did Dad really leave money for us?" asked Emily, with the curiosity typical of an 8-year-old. "Your father left much more than money. He left proof of how much he loved us and how much he cared about our future," answered Sarah, choosing words the children could understand. That afternoon, while the children rested, Sarah and Mrs. Dorothy talked on the porch about the next steps. "My dear, You are much stronger today than yesterday. It's amazing how truly bad people can help us discover our own strength, commented the elderly neighbor wisely. You're right. For a moment I thought I was going to lose everything again, but now I realize I have much more control over the situation than I imagined, reflected Sarah. Marcus chose well when he married you. I knew you would be able to protect the family even when he was no longer here, said Mrs. Dorothy affectionately. 2 days later, Attorney Karen called with positive news. There was no tax investigation in Marcus's name, and all the documents were in order to begin the probate process. Mrs. Sarah, I can say with certainty that your rights to the assets are indisputable. Moreover, the amounts are larger than you initially imagined, said the public defender enthusiastically. Larger how? Asked Sarah, surprised. The stock investments have yielded significantly in recent months. Your husband truly had a talent for financial choices. With the updated values, you are in a position not only to rebuild your home, but also to secure the college education for all 3 children, explained Attorney Karen. Sarah felt her legs weaken with emotion. Marcus had achieved much more than she had ever dreamed. That quiet, hard-working man had built a solid future for the family without ever boasting or creating unnecessary expectations. How long will it take to access these funds? Asked Sarah. With all the documents organized as they are, about 2 months for partial release and at most 6 months for full access, replied the defender. 2 months. It was a time frame Sarah could manage with Mrs. Dorothy's help, and perhaps a temporary job. That same afternoon, Sarah decided to call Jennifer and clarify the situation definitively. Jennifer, I need to tell you that I sought independent legal advice. I found out there is no Internal Revenue Service investigation regarding Marcus, and that you have no inheritance rights to his investments, said Sarah directly. Jennifer was silent for a few seconds before responding. Sarah, Attorney Richard may have exaggerated the information. I really don't understand much about these matters, admitted her sister-in-law, embarrassed. Jennifer, if you were having financial difficulties, you could have talked to me directly. You didn't need to try to deceive me, said Sarah, keeping a firm but not hostile tone. You're right. I have some debts and I thought that... Well, it was wrong of me, confessed Jennifer. When I have access to the resources, we can talk about some help, but clearly and honestly, offered Sarah, showing generosity despite everything. Thank you, Sarah, and I'm sorry for everything. Marcus always said you were special, and now I understand why, said Jennifer, with apparent sincerity. After resolving the situation with Jennifer, Sarah felt she had overcome the biggest obstacle on the path to rebuilding her life. But there were still practical challenges to face. The first was finding work to support the family during the months of waiting for the funds to be released. The second was deciding where to live, since the destroyed house would need to be demolished and rebuilt. The third was dealing with the children's trauma so they could move forward without carrying deep emotional scars. Mrs. Dorothy, do you know anyone who might need an employee? Asked Sarah during dinner. I know several people, dear. But first tell me, what kind of work would you like to do? Replied the neighbor. Sarah reflected on her skills. She had worked as a receptionist before marrying Marcus, had experience with customer service and basic computer knowledge. I would like something during the children's school hours, so I can pick them up from school and help with homework, explained Sarah. I have a friend who works at City Hall. She mentioned they need someone for the front desk at the Department of Health. The hours are from 8 to 4, but perhaps you can negotiate leaving earlier to pick up the children, suggested Mrs. Dorothy. The opportunity seemed perfect. Sarah had always admired people who worked in public health, helping the community in times of need. Could you introduce me to your friend? Asked Sarah, excited. Of course. I'll call her tomorrow, promised Mrs. Dorothy. That night, Sarah wrote a list of goals for the coming months. Get the job at the Department of Health, formalize the inventory of Marcus's assets, find a house to rent while deciding whether to rebuild on the same lot or look for another location, enroll the children in a new school near the new address, and start psychological counseling to help the whole family process the losses and changes. The list was long, but for the first time in months, Sarah felt each item was achievable. It wouldn't be easy, but it was possible. 3 days later, Sarah was called for an interview at the Department of Health. The coordinator, a friendly woman of about 50 named Linda, showed immediate interest when she learned of the circumstances that led Sarah to seek employment. "Our work here mainly involves assisting people in difficult situations. Those who have faced their own hardships usually have more empathy and understanding," explained Linda during the interview. "I've always liked helping people, and now I better understand what it's like to need that help," Sarah replied sincerely. "The hours would be from 8 to 4, but I can authorize leaving at 3:30 on weekdays so you can pick up the children from school. The salary is 1.5 times the minimum wage plus a meal allowance," explained the coordinator. It wasn't a lot of money, but it would be enough to cover basic expenses during the waiting months. Sarah accepted immediately. "When can I start?" she asked, eager. "Monday next week. That gives you time to get the children settled in the new school," replied Linda. Over the weekend, Sarah and the children visited 3 schools near Mrs. Dorothy's house. At the third school, a well-structured municipal institution, the principal was very welcoming. "We have experience with children who have been through trauma. Our school psychologist can support their adjustment," offered the principal, a lady with graying hair and a warm smile. The children liked the new school, especially the playground and the library. Emily was delighted with the available children's books, and Olivia was interested in the art activities she saw during the visit. "Mum, can I study here?" asked Emily, showing enthusiasm she hadn't felt in weeks. "Of course, sweetheart. You'll start here on Monday," confirmed Sarah, happy to see her daughters excited about something new. Brandon, always more reserved, talked at length with the physical education teacher about the available sports activities. Sarah noticed her son was looking for ways to channel the frustrations and energies built up during the difficult days. On Sunday night, the eve of Sarah's first day of work and the children's first day at the new school, Mrs. Dorothy prepared a special dinner. "This is an important milestone for you all. You're starting a new phase of life," said the elderly neighbor, serving a chocolate cake she had made especially for the occasion. "Mrs. Dorothy, how can I thank you for everything you've done for us?" asked Sarah, moved. "Dear, you don't need to thank me. Helping is what gives meaning to the life of an old person like me." "You've brought joy to this old house," the neighbor replied affectionately. "When I gain access to Marcus's resources, I want to repay all the expenses we've had here," insisted Sarah. "If you insist on that, I won't speak to you anymore," joked Mrs. Dorothy. "This is your home for as long as you need it." In her first week of work, Sarah discovered she really had an aptitude for customer service at the Department of Health. Her personal experience with difficulties made her especially sensitive to the needs of the people seeking help. "Sarah, you have a natural gift for calming people in stressful situations," commented Linda, after observing how she had helped a desperate mother get urgent care for her sick child. "I just understand how they feel. I've been in their shoes," Sarah replied humbly. During the second week, Attorney Karen called with an update on the estate. "Mrs. Mitchell, I managed to speed up some procedures. In 3 weeks, we'll have the partial release of funds, enough for you to rent a house and begin to establish yourself independently," the public defender informed her. "That's wonderful. And about rebuilding the destroyed house?" asked Sarah. "With the flood insurance your husband had taken out, plus your own resources, you can rebuild a better house on the same lot, or buy a property in a safer location," explained Attorney Karen. Sarah didn't know that Marcus had taken out flood insurance. Once again, he had thought of protecting the family in ways she hadn't even imagined. "How do I find out about this insurance?" asked Sarah. "I'm already taking care of it. The documents were among the papers from the safe, we just hadn't reviewed them all yet," replied the defender. Each discovery about Marcus's precautions increased Sarah's admiration for the man she had loved. He really had thought of everything to protect the family. That afternoon, Sarah talked with the children about the possibility of moving into their own house in a few weeks. "Can we choose the new house?" asked Emily excitedly. "Of course. You'll help me choose a place that's good for the whole family," promised Sarah. "I want a backyard to play in," requested Olivia, her eyes shining. "And I want it to be near the new school because I like the friends I've made," said Brandon, showing he was adapting well. Sarah smiled, noticing the children were regaining the ability to dream about the future. That was as important as financial stability. Over the weekend, they started visiting houses for rent. At the 5th house they visited, In a quiet neighborhood 10 minutes from the children's school, they all fell in love immediately. The house had 3 bedrooms, a living room, a spacious kitchen, a backyard with some fruit trees, and a porch where Sarah could already picture herself having breakfast with the children before they went to school and work. "This is perfect, Mom," declared Emily, running through the backyard. "There's space for me to plant a little vegetable garden," observed Brandon, showing interest in activities that reminded him of things he did with his father. "It's close to the playground," exclaimed Olivia, pointing to a small park visible from her bedroom window. "The rent fits my budget, and the owner seems nice," considered Sarah, analyzing the practical aspects. They signed the contract that same day, with the move scheduled for the end of the following week. The news of the move brought mixed feelings for Mrs. Dorothy, who had grown accustomed to the family's company. "I'm going to miss you all so much, but I know it's best for the children to have their own space," said the elderly neighbor, wiping away a tear. "Mrs. Dorothy, you will continue to be part of our family. We'll visit you every weekend and you can always come over to our house too," Sarah assured her. "And will we bake cakes together?" asked Olivia, who had grown very fond of the neighbor. "Of course, my little one." "I'll teach you new recipes," promised Mrs. Dorothy, hugging the child. During the moving week, Sarah reflected on all the transformations that had happened in less than 2 months. The flood that seemed to have destroyed everything had actually revealed resources and strengths she didn't even know existed. Marcus continued protecting and caring for the family even after his departure, through the meticulous financial planning he had done. But Sarah had also discovered her own ability to face adversity, make difficult decisions, and protect the children. "Mum, you're different," commented Brandon as they packed the last items. "Different how?" asked Sarah, curious about her son's perception. "Stronger, like Dad always said you were, but you didn't believe," replied the boy with the precocious wisdom he had developed. Brandon's observation touched Sarah deeply. Marcus had indeed always said she was stronger than she thought. Perhaps it took facing an extreme situation to discover he was right. On the first day in the new house, Sarah woke up early and walked through the empty rooms, imagining what life would be like there. For the first time in months, she felt genuine peace and optimism about the future. The children adapted quickly to the new environment. Emily organized her books on the bedroom shelf with the care of a librarian. Olivia transformed a corner of the porch into her dollhouse, and Brandon started planning where he would make the vegetable garden in the backyard. "This really is our home," Sarah said to herself, watching the children play in the backyard through the kitchen window. 2 months after the move, Sarah received the call she had been waiting for. Attorney Karen confirmed that all the resources left by Marcus had been released and were now available in her bank account. "Mrs. Mitchell, I can confirm the amounts are even larger than we initially estimated. Your husband made excellent investments," said the public defender with satisfaction. "Attorney, I don't know how to thank you for all your help," said Sarah, her voice choked with emotion. "Seeing families like yours overcoming difficulties is the greatest reward of my work," Attorney Karen replied sincerely. That night, Sarah gathered the children in the living room for an important conversation. "Kids, do you remember the safe we found when our old house was flooded?" began Sarah. "Yes, Dad's treasure," exclaimed Olivia. "That's right. Dad left enough money to secure our future. We can buy this house we're renting, you can study in private schools if you want, and even go to college when you grow up," explained Sarah. "But I like the school I'm at now," said Emily. "Me too," agreed Brandon. "Then you can stay at the same school. The important thing is that now we have choices, and Dad made that possible," clarified Sarah. "Dad is still taking care of us even though he's not here," observed Brandon with impressive maturity. "Exactly. And now our responsibility is to use this gift he gave us wisely," concluded Sarah. In the following months, Sarah made several important decisions. She bought the house they lived in, invested part of the resources to ensure future income, created savings accounts for each child's college education, and decided to take a higher education course in administration to improve her professional prospects. She also decided to create a small fund to help other families in vulnerable situations, inspired by the generosity Mrs. Dorothy had shown them. "Marcus would be proud of your decisions," commented Mrs. Dorothy during one of her weekend visits. "I hope so. I always try to think about how he would act," replied Sarah. but you also need to trust your own instincts. They've been excellent, encouraged the elderly neighbor. 1 year after the flood, Sarah organized a special lunch at her home. She invited Mrs. Dorothy, Attorney Karen, Linda from the Department of Health, and even Jennifer, who had become a present and caring aunt after they overcame their initial misunderstandings. "This is a day of gratitude," said Sarah, standing up to make a toast. "Exactly 1 year ago I thought I had lost everything. Today I realize I've gained much more than I lost." "What did you gain?" asked Emily, curious. "I gained the certainty that I am capable of protecting you all. I gained true friendships. I gained work that fulfills me. And most of all, I gained peace about the future," replied Sarah, looking at each person present. "And we gained an even closer family," added Brandon. "And a new house with a yard," completed Olivia, making everyone laugh. During the afternoon, the children played in the yard while the adults talked on the porch. Sarah observed the scene with deep satisfaction. The flood had destroyed a house, but it had revealed a family strength she didn't even know existed. "Sarah, can I ask a personal question?" said Attorney Karen, taking advantage of a more private moment. "Of course," replied Sarah. "Have you ever thought about marrying again?" asked the public defender with friendly curiosity. Sarah reflected on the question. There were interesting men at work and in the community, but she still felt no hurry to get into a romantic relationship. "For now, I'm focused on consolidating this new phase of life. Maybe in the future, but no rush," Sarah answered honestly. "That's wise. You've built a solid foundation for your family." "Any man would be lucky to be part of this structure you've created," commented Attorney Karen. At night, after all the guests had left, Sarah put the children to bed and stayed on the porch, looking at the stars. She thought of Marcus and everything they had lived through together. She felt gratitude for having been loved by such a careful and forward-thinking man. "Thank you, my love," she whispered to the starry sky. "You kept your promise to always take care of us." A gentle breeze swayed the trees in the yard, and Sarah felt as if Marcus were there, approving the decisions she had made and proud of the strong woman she had become. 2 years after the flood, Sarah had finished her administration course and been promoted to assistant coordinator at the Department of Health. The children were well adjusted at school, with good grades and solid friendships. Emily had developed a passion for reading and dreamed of being a teacher. Brandon was interested in engineering and had set up a small workshop in the yard where he fixed his friends' bicycles. Olivia showed artistic talent and loved to draw. "Mum, do you remember when our house sank in the water?" asked Olivia during a Sunday breakfast. "Yes, I remember. Why?" replied Sarah. "It was the best thing that happened to us," declared the girl with the sincerity of children. "Why do you think that?" asked Sarah, surprised. "Because we discovered Daddy's treasure. We met Mrs. Dorothy. You became stronger and now we have a better house," explained Olivia with irrefutable childlike logic. Sarah smiled, realizing that her youngest daughter had intuitively understood something it had taken her time to accept. Sometimes you need to lose something to discover what truly matters. "Olivia is right," agreed Brandon. "If the flood hadn't happened, we would never have discovered we could be happy without Dad being physically here. He's still with us in other ways," added Emily wisely. Sarah hugged her 3 children, feeling her heart full of love and pride. Marcus had planted seeds of love, responsibility, and unity that kept growing and blooming even in his absence. That afternoon, Sarah decided to write a letter to Marcus, as she occasionally did in moments of deep reflection. "My dear Marcus, today marks 2 years since we discovered your gift buried in the backyard. I want you to know that we not only used the money wisely, but more importantly, we understood the lesson of love and planning that you taught us. The children are growing up strong and secure, knowing they were deeply loved by you. I discovered a strength I didn't even know I had, and although I still miss you every day, I'm no longer afraid of the future. Thank you for continuing to take care of us, even from a distance. With all my love, Sarah." She put the letter in a special box where she kept all her most precious memories of Marcus. That box had become her own treasure chest, not with money, but with memories that were worth much more. 3 years after the flood, Sarah received an unexpected proposal. The mayor of the city invited her to run for Department of Health in the next election, recognizing her competent work and her genuine connection with the community. "Sarah, you transformed how we serve families in vulnerable situations. You would be an excellent secretary," said the mayor during a meeting. The proposal left her honored but also apprehensive about the responsibilities it would involve. "I need to talk to my children before making any decision," Sarah replied. "Of course. It is precisely this concern for family that makes you special for the position," commented the mayor. That night, Sarah talked to the children about the opportunity. "Does that mean you would be the boss of everyone at the Department of Health?" asked Olivia, impressed. "More or less, but it also means less time at home and more responsibilities," Sarah explained honestly. "Mom, do you like helping people at work?" asked Emily. "Very much. It's one of the things that fulfills me the most," admitted Sarah. "Then you should accept. Dad always said we should use our talents to help others," said Brandon with conviction. "Are you sure? It will mean some changes to our routine," Sarah cautioned. "We've already been through much bigger changes. We can handle these too," declared Emily with maturity. Sarah smiled, realizing she had raised children capable of supporting her dreams instead of limiting them. Marcus would be proud of the family they had become. "Then I'll accept the proposal," decided Sarah. "Dad would be proud," said Brandon, echoing exactly the thought that had crossed his mother's mind. During the election campaign months, Sarah discovered she had a natural talent for leadership and communication with the community. Her story of personal overcoming resonated with many families who had also faced hardships. "She understands our reality because she has lived through similar situations," commented a voter during a rally. "She's one of us who managed to succeed in life but didn't forget where she came from," said another supporter. The victory in the election was significant, demonstrating that the community trusted her management ability. On the day of her swearing in as Secretary of Health, Sarah was accompanied by her 3 children, Mrs. Dorothy, Attorney Karen, and several people who had become important in her journey of rebuilding. "Today I assume this position with humility and determination," said Sarah during her inauguration speech. "I promise to work so that no family goes through the difficulties my family went through, and that everyone has dignified access to the health services they deserve." After the ceremony, the children surrounded her with proud hugs. "Mom, you are amazing," said Emily, her eyes shining with admiration. "We are all amazing. We are a family that knows how to face challenges together," corrected Sarah, including her children in the credit. That night at home, Sarah looked again at the empty safe she kept as a memento on the living room shelf. That object had changed their lives not just because of the resources it had contained, but mainly because it symbolized Marcus's thoughtful love and revealed her own ability to turn adversity into opportunity. "The real treasure was never the money," Sarah reflected aloud. "What was it then, Mom?" asked Olivia, who was playing on the nearby rug. "It was discovering that our family is stronger than any storm," answered Sarah, stroking her daughter's hair. 5 years after the flood, Sarah was established as one of the most competent Department of Health administrators in the region. She had implemented innovative family care programs, created protocols for emergency situations, and developed partnerships with non-governmental organizations to assist families in vulnerable situations. The children had grown and developed impressively. Brandon, now 15, was one of the best students in school and had won prizes at science fairs with engineering projects. Emily, 13, was a class leader and had started a reading group at school. Olivia, 10, participated in drawing contests and dreamed of becoming an architect. "Mom, do you remember when we thought our life was over?" commented Emily during a family dinner. "Yes, I remember. Why are you thinking about that?" asked Sarah. "Because today at school we studied resilience and I realized our family is the perfect example of it," explained Emily. "Resilience is the ability to recover from difficulties and become even stronger," added Brandon, showing he had understood the concept. "So we are a resilient family," Olivia declared proudly. Sarah felt a deep emotion realizing that her children had internalized the lessons of strength and overcoming they had experienced together. Marcus had left much more than financial resources. He had left a legacy of values and determination. "You're right. And do you know who taught us to be resilient?" asked Sarah. "Dad," the three answered in unison. "Dad and also you. Each of us taught strength to the others," corrected Sarah, wanting them to understand they had been active agents in their own recovery. That night, Sarah received an unexpected call. It was a journalist from a regional newspaper who had heard about her story and wanted to do a feature on families who had overcome adversity through unity and determination. "I believe your story can inspire other families going through similar difficulties," explained the journalist. Sarah hesitated at first, as she had always preferred to keep her personal life private, but she thought of all the families she assisted at the Department of Health who could benefit from knowing that overcoming was possible. "I accept, but on one condition. I want the article to include information about resources available for families in need, like the Public Defender's Office, social programs, and support organizations," Sarah agreed. "Perfect. That will make the feature even more useful," approved the journalist. The article was published 2 weeks later under the headline, "From Despair to Hope: How a Flood Revealed a Family's Strength." The text told Sarah and her children's story in a sensitive and inspiring way, including testimonials from Mrs. Dorothy, Attorney Karen, and even Jennifer, who had become a devoted aunt over the years. The response was surprising. Sarah received dozens of calls and messages from families who identified with her story and sought guidance for their own difficulties. "Mom, you're famous," joked Brandon, showing the positive comments on the online version of the article. "It's not about being famous, son. It's about showing that everyone can overcome difficulties if they have determination and support," explained Sarah. "Can I take the article to show at school?" asked Emily proudly. "Of course, but remember that the most important thing isn't that other people know our story, but that it can help those in need," Sarah advised. Inspired by the positive response to the article, Sarah decided to write a book detailing her experience and offering practical guidance for families in vulnerable situations. She worked on the manuscript during the early morning hours after her children fell asleep and before going to work. The book, titled Revealing Waters: A Journey of Loss and Rebuilding, was published by a regional publisher a year later. All income from sales was directed to a support fund for families affected by natural disasters. At the book launch, held at the Springfield Public Library, Sarah was surrounded by her entire extended family, her 3 children, Mrs. Dorothy, Attorney Karen, Linda, Jennifer, and dozens of people whose lives she had touched over the years. "This book isn't mine. It's ours," Sarah said during the launch speech. "Every person who supported me on this journey contributed to these pages, and every person who feels inspired to overcome their own difficulties will be part of the continuation of this story." "Mommy, are you a writer now too?" asked Olivia, impressed with her mother. "I am many things, my love. A mother, a Department of Health secretary, and now a writer. But mostly, I am a person who learned that we can reinvent ourselves as many times as necessary," Sarah replied. 6 years after the flood, the house where Sarah and the children lived had become a true home, full of happy memories and shared achievements. The backyard Brandon had dreamed of cultivating was now a productive vegetable garden that supplied the family and even yielded some produce to donate to families in need. Emily had created a small library in her room, with books she exchanged with classmates and donated to underprivileged children. Olivia had transformed one wall of her room into a gallery for her artwork, which had already won city and regional contests. Sarah watched her children's transformations with pride and gratitude. Each had found ways to turn their experiences into strength and generosity. "Kids, do you remember what the first thing you thought was when you saw our house being swallowed by the flood?" Sarah asked during a family conversation on the porch. "I thought we were going to lose everything," admitted Emily. "I thought we wouldn't have a home anymore," said Brandon. "I was afraid the water would take my toys," confessed Olivia. "And what would you tell yourselves if you could speak to yourselves on that day?" Sarah continued. "That we were going to discover something much better," Emily replied immediately. "That Dad was still watching over us," added Brandon. "That we were going to have an even nicer home," Olivia finished. And I would tell you that we were going to discover we are stronger than we imagined, Sarah concluded. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mrs. Dorothy, who at 82 still had the energy for regular visits and active participation in the family's life. The invitations for Brandon's graduation have arrived, announced the elderly neighbor, handing over an envelope. Brandon was graduating high school as one of the top students in his class and had been accepted into a public engineering university in a nearby city. "I can hardly believe my boy is going to college," said Mrs. Dorothy with tears in her eyes. "It's not just Brandon who is graduating, it's our whole family graduating and overcoming," Sarah philosophized, hugging her eldest son. "Mom, can I ask a serious question?" said Brandon, with the maturity of his 18 years. "Of course, son. Are you afraid that I'll go to college and won't be here to help anymore?" asked Brandon, showing the concern with responsibilities he had carried since he was little. Sarah felt her heart tighten, realizing her son still felt responsible for taking care of the family. "Brandon, my love, your responsibility now is to study and become the engineer you dream of being. Emily and Olivia are grown, I'm established professionally, and we have all the structure your father planned for us. You can follow your dreams with peace of mind," Sarah assured firmly. "But who will take care of the garden?" asked Brandon, half joking, half serious. "I will," exclaimed Emily. "I've always wanted to learn, and this way I can continue the work you started." "And I'll help," offered Olivia. "I can draw pretty signs to identify the plants." Sarah watched her children's interaction with deep satisfaction. They had learned that caring for each other didn't mean sacrificing personal dreams, but rather supporting each one in the pursuit of their goals. On the eve of Brandon's departure for college, the family organized a small celebration. Mrs. Dorothy prepared all the young man's favorite dishes, and several important people from the family's journey came to say goodbye. "Brandon, you represent the future your father dreamed for you," said Attorney Karen during a toast. "And you also represent proof that investment in education always pays off," added Linda, from the Department of Health. "He mainly represents that it's possible to grow strong even when you go through difficulties in childhood," Mrs. Dorothy wisely completed. Brandon, normally reserved, was moved by the displays of affection. "Thank you to everyone who has been part of our story. I promise to use everything I've learned here to build a future that honors my father's memory and my family's love," said the young man, showing impressive emotional maturity. That night, Sarah stayed awake, mentally organizing what life would be like with only 2 daughters at home. Brandon had always been her most solid emotional support, taking on responsibilities he shouldn't have taken on so early. Now she would need to continue being strong alone, but she knew she was prepared. "Mom, is everything okay?" asked Emily, appearing in the kitchen where Sarah was drinking tea. "Yes, my love. Just thinking about how fast you've all grown," replied Sarah. "Mom, can I tell you something?" said Emily, sitting next to her mother. "Of course. All these years I noticed you worried a lot about being strong for us, but I want you to know that we also want to be strong for you," Emily declared seriously. Her daughter's words touched Sarah deeply. She had focused so much on protecting the children that she sometimes forgot they also wanted to return the care. "Emily, you've been my source of strength for a long time. Just by existing and being who you are, you already make me strong," replied Sarah, hugging her daughter. "Then you don't have to carry everything alone. We can share the responsibilities," proposed Emily. "You're right. From now on, let's be a family where everyone takes care of everyone," agreed Sarah. 7 years after the flood, Sarah was established as one of the most respected political leaders in the region. She had been unanimously re-elected as Secretary of Health and was often invited to give lectures on public management and personal overcoming in other cities. Brandon was in his 3rd year of engineering, with excellent academic performance and already participating in research projects. Emily had become a teenager engaged in social causes, leading book drive projects for community libraries. Olivia, now 12, had discovered a talent for children's architecture and dreamed of designing homes for families who lost their houses in natural disasters. "Each of you has found ways to turn our experience into something positive for other people," observed Sarah during a family meeting to plan the vacation. I learned that from you, Mom. You turned our pain into strength to help other families at the Department of Health, said Brandon, who was back for his university break. And you also wrote a book that helps other people, added Emily, and created a fund for families affected by floods, completed Olivia. Sarah smiled, realizing she had inadvertently taught her children that difficult experiences can be turned into tools to help others. Do you know what that means? Asked Sarah. That Dad is still helping people through us, Brandon replied thoughtfully. Exactly. The love and planning he left us have multiplied and now benefit many other families, confirmed Sarah. During that vacation, Brandon had an important conversation with his mother. Mum, at university I met other students who lost their father early, and I noticed something interesting, commented Brandon. What did you notice? Asked Sarah, curious. Most of them carry anger or sadness, but the three of us carry gratitude. Why do you think that is? Questioned the young man. Sarah reflected on her son's profound question. I think it's because your father didn't just leave us material resources, but most importantly, he taught us values, and because we chose to honor his memory by being happy, not by being permanent victims, answered Sarah. That makes sense. Dad wanted us to be happy, not to suffer forever from his absence, agreed Brandon. Exactly. The best way to honor those we love is by living fully the life they dreamed for us, confirmed Sarah. 8 years after the flood, Sarah received an unexpected proposal to run for City Hall. Several political groups and civil society organizations had joined forces to convince her to run, recognizing her competent work at the Department of Health and her natural leadership. Sarah, you transformed public health in this city. Imagine what you could do as mayor, argued one of the community leaders. The proposal left her honored but also worried about the implications for family life. I need to talk to my children. They have always been part of all my important decisions, replied Sarah. It's precisely this concern for family that makes you special for leadership, commented another supporter. That night, Sarah gathered Emily and Olivia to discuss the proposal. Brandon joined the conversation via video call from university. Being mayor would mean even less time at home and much more responsibility, Sarah explained honestly. Mom, you would be an amazing mayor, said Emily with conviction. And you could help many other families like ours, added Olivia. But are you sure you can handle this? Asked Sarah, concerned. Mum, we're 15 and 12, we're not little kids anymore, and we always have Mrs. Dorothy if we need anything, reminded Emily. Besides, Dad always said we should use our talents to serve others, added Brandon through the screen. So you think I should accept? Asked Sarah. We think you should do what your heart tells you, but we want you to know we'll support any decision you make, Emily replied maturely. Sarah felt immense pride in her children's wisdom and generosity. Marcus would be proud of how they had become selfless and supportive people. Then I accept the candidacy, decided Sarah. The campaign for mayor was intense, but Sarah found that her story of overcoming adversity and her competent work at the Department of Health had created a solid base of support in the community. She understands our struggles because she's been through them herself, voters said. She's someone who turns problems into solutions, others would comment. The victory was decisive, showing that the city trusted her leadership to face municipal challenges. On the day of her inauguration as mayor, Sarah was accompanied by her entire extended family. Mrs. Dorothy, at 84 years old, was in the front row with tears of pride in her eyes. Brandon had returned from university especially for the ceremony. Emily and Olivia wore special dresses they had chosen for the occasion. I assume this position with the same determination I used to rebuild my life after the flood 8 years ago, said Sarah during her inaugural address. I promise to work so that our city becomes a place where all families can overcome difficulties and build prosperous futures. After the ceremony, the family gathered at home for an intimate celebration. Dad would be so proud, said Emily, looking at the mayor's sash that Sarah had placed over the armchair. He is proud, corrected Olivia. Just because we can't see him doesn't mean he isn't watching everything. Olivia is right, agreed Brandon. Dad is still part of all our achievements. Sarah looked at the empty safe on the bookshelf, which had become a symbol of transformation in their home. That object had changed their lives in ways they could never have imagined when they discovered it emerging from the floodwaters. The safe didn't just hold money, Sarah reflected aloud. What else did it hold? Asked Olivia, curious. It held lessons about love, planning, determination, and the importance of never giving up on family, replied Sarah. And now those lessons are spread throughout the city through your work, observed Emily wisely. That night Sarah wrote in her personal diary, Marcus, today I became the mayor of this city we loved so much. Our children have grown to be honest, generous, and determined people. The money you kept in the safe gave us stability, but your lessons of love gave us purpose. Every decision I make as mayor is made with the thought of protecting other families as you protected ours. Thank you for continuing to be my guide, even from a distance. 9 years after the flood, Sarah was established as one of the most competent mayors in the region. She had implemented innovative housing programs for at-risk families, created municipal emergency protocols, and developed partnerships to generate local jobs. Brandon had graduated with a degree in engineering and decided to pursue a master's degree with a thesis on constructing disaster-resilient housing. Emily was in her final year of high school, with plans to study law to specialize in the rights of vulnerable families. Olivia had won a scholarship to an art school where she was developing social architecture projects. Our family has become a force for social transformation, observed Mrs. Dorothy during a Sunday visit. It all started with that safe the water revealed, recalled Emily. Actually, it all started with the love Dad felt for us, corrected Brandon profoundly. He's right. The safe was just the symbol of the love, not the source of it, agreed Sarah. That year, Sarah received an unexpected invitation to give a lecture at a national conference on crisis management and community rebuilding. Her story and her work as mayor had caught the attention of experts from across the country. Mom, you're going to be famous all over the United States, joked Olivia. What's important isn't fame, but the opportunity to share what we've learned to help other communities, replied Sarah. Are you going to tell them about Dad's safe? Asked Emily. I'm going to tell them about how we turned a personal tragedy into strength to serve others, clarified Sarah. The lecture was a success, and Sarah received dozens of invitations to collaborate on reconstruction projects in other cities that had suffered natural disasters. She decided to accept some of them, using her vacation time and weekends to share experiences. Mom has become a national crisis recovery consultant, Brandon said proudly during a video call. I'm not a consultant for anything. I'm just someone who learned some lessons through difficult experiences and wants to share what might help others, Sarah replied humbly. 10 years after the flood, Sarah decided to organize a special event, a gathering of families who had overcome adversity with the goal of creating a mutual support network in the region. The event was held at the municipal gymnasium, with over 200 families present. Each would share their story of overcoming and the lessons learned. The idea for this gathering came from my own experience, Sarah said during the event's opening. 10 years ago, a flood destroyed our home, but it revealed resources my late husband had set aside to protect our family. Since then, I've learned that all families have internal resources to overcome difficulties, even when they don't realize it at first. The event was so successful that it became annual, growing with each edition and turning into a regional reference for supporting families in need. During the 3rd edition of the event, Emily, now a college student, gave an emotional speech. I was 8 years old when our house was destroyed by the flood. At the time, I thought we had lost everything. Today, I realize that was where our family truly began. My mother taught us that we can choose to be defined by the tragedies we live through or by the resources we discover to overcome them. We chose the second option, and that changed not only our lives but also the lives of many other families through my mother's work as mayor. After Emily's speech, an elderly lady approached Sarah. Madam Mayor, my family lost everything in a flood last year. Your example gave us the strength to start over. Today my son got a new job and we are rebuilding our lives, said the lady with tears in her eyes. The strength was always within you. Sometimes we just need to see that other people have managed to believe that we can too, Sarah replied, hugging the lady. Moments like this reaffirmed for Sarah that the suffering they had lived through had become a tool to lessen the suffering of others. 15 years after the flood, Sarah was completing her second term as mayor with record public approval. Brandon had finished his master's degree and started a doctorate, always focused on resilient housing. Emily was graduating from law school and was already interning at the Public Defender's Office. Olivia, now 17, had won national social architecture competitions and planned to attend college with a focus on housing for vulnerable populations. Do you realize how each of us has found ways to turn our experience into work that benefits others? Sarah observed during a family dinner. It's as if Dad had planted a seed that grew and produced many other plants, Olivia philosophized poetically. I like that metaphor. Marcus really planted seeds of love and responsibility that continue to bear fruit, Sarah agreed. Mom, can I ask a personal question? Said Emily. Of course. In all these years, have you never thought about getting married again? Asked the daughter with respectful curiosity. Sarah smiled. The question had come up other times, and her answer had evolved over the years. At first, I was too focused on rebuilding our lives to think about it. Then I was building my career and taking care of you. Now, honestly, I am a complete person. If someone special comes along who adds joy to our life without creating conflict, they'll be welcome. But I don't feel a lack or a need, Sarah answered honestly. Do you still love Dad? Olivia asked with the frankness of a 17-year-old. I will always love your father for what he meant in my life and for the family we built together. But I've learned the difference between loving someone and being emotionally dependent on someone. I can love Marcus forever and still be open to loving someone else in a different way, Sarah explained with emotional maturity. That makes sense, said Brandon. Dad always said that true love wants the best for the loved one even when we can't be present. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mrs. Dorothy, now 89 years old, but still active and involved with the family. Anna's graduation invitations have arrived, announced the elderly neighbor, handing over an envelope. Emily was graduating as one of the top students in her law class and had been accepted to work at the Public Defender's Office, following in attorney Karen's footsteps. I can hardly believe my little girl is going to be a lawyer, said Mrs. Dorothy, wiping away a tear. And a lawyer who will defend families in difficult situations, just like ours was defended by attorney Karen, Sarah added proudly. The circle is complete, Brandon observed wisely. At Emily's graduation, the family was all together again. Attorney Karen, who had become Emily's mentor during college, was present as a special guest. Emily represents everything I hoped for when I began working in family law, said Attorney Karen during her speech as the class's keynote speaker. She combines technical competence with personal experience, forming a professional who truly understands the needs of vulnerable families. After the ceremony, Emily gave a special thank you. I want to especially thank my mother, who taught me that we can turn difficult experiences into tools to help others. I promise to use my career to defend families like ours was defended, said Emily, looking directly at Sarah. Sarah felt her heart overflowing with pride and emotion. Emily had chosen to continue the work of family protection that had begun when they discovered Marcus's safe 15 years earlier. That night at home, the family gathered on the porch to talk about the next steps. Brandon was planning to return to work in the region after completing his doctorate. Emily would start at the Public Defender's Office the following month, and Olivia was deciding between universities that had offered scholarships for her social architecture projects. Do you realize our family has become a force for social transformation? Sarah observed. All thanks to that flood that seemed to have destroyed everything, Emily recalled. It wasn't the flood, it was how we chose to respond to the flood, Brandon corrected thoughtfully. You're right. The tragedy only revealed resources that already existed within us, Sarah agreed. And in Dad's safe, added Olivia. The safe was important, but it wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was discovering that we can be strong together, Sarah concluded. Mrs. Dorothy, who had remained silent observing the conversation, finally spoke. In almost 90 years of life, I've seen many families go through hardships. Your difference is that you turned suffering into wisdom and wisdom into service to others. Marcus would be proud not only of what you've achieved, but mainly of who you've become. The elderly neighbor's words were met with emotional silence. Each family member reflected on the journey they had traveled together since that day when the waters revealed the safe buried by Marcus. 20 years after the flood, Sarah Mitchell was completing a third term as mayor, elected by popular acclaim. The city had transformed into a national model for crisis management and social inclusion. Brandon had returned as a municipal engineer, specializing in resilient housing. Emily was the coordinator of the Regional Public Defender's Office, known for her competence and sensitivity. Olivia was studying architecture at a federal university, with projects focused on sustainable, affordable housing. "Mum, today marks exactly 20 years since we found Dad's safe," said Olivia during a special breakfast the family had organized to commemorate the date. 20 years of transformations we could never have imagined that day, reflected Sarah. "I remember we thought it was the end of everything," said Emily, now a respected 28-year-old attorney. "It was the end of one phase and the beginning of something much greater," corrected Brandon, a 30-year-old engineer married to a teacher and father of a 2-year-old girl. "Now we have a little granddaughter to continue the family story," said Sarah, looking at a photo of little Grace, Brandon's daughter. "And she'll grow up hearing about Grandpa Marcus, who planted seeds of love even before she was born," added Emily. The conversation was interrupted by a phone call. It was the state governor inviting Sarah to join a national commission on housing policies for families in vulnerable situations. "Madam Mayor, your personal and professional experience in overcoming housing crises makes you the ideal person for this work," said the governor. "I am honored by the invitation, but I need to assess if I can balance it with my municipal commitments," replied Sarah. "Of course, but consider that it would be an opportunity to bring the lessons you've learned in your city to the entire country," argued the governor. After ending the call, Sarah discussed the opportunity with her children. "Mom, you could influence national policies," said Emily excitedly. "Imagine how many families could benefit from your experience," added Brandon. "But it would mean a lot of travel and less time with family," pondered Sarah. "Mom, we're adults now, and you always taught us that we should use our talents to serve others. This invitation is recognition that your talents can benefit the whole country," argued Olivia wisely. Sarah smiled, realizing her children had become her most important advisors and supporters. "If I accept, it will be the last major mission of my public career. After that, I want to dedicate myself more to family, especially to Grace," decided Sarah. "Dad would be proud to know his lessons of love have reached national policies," said Emily emotionally. That afternoon, Sarah walked to the cemetery where Marcus was buried. It was a visit she made regularly on special dates to talk to him and update him on the family's life. "Marcus, our children have become honest and generous people, just as you dreamed. Brandon is a competent engineer who designs safe homes for vulnerable families. Emily is a dedicated attorney who defends the rights of those most in need. Olivia is preparing to be a social architect, and now we have a little granddaughter who will grow up knowing your lessons through us," Sarah recounted, sitting on the bench near the grave. "The money you kept in the safe gave us stability, but your lessons of love gave us purpose. Now I will work on national policies so other families can have the same opportunities you provided for us. Thank you for continuing to guide our family, even from a distance," concluded Sarah, placing fresh flowers on the grave. On the way back home, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary journey they had lived. The flood that seemed to have destroyed everything had actually revealed resources and strengths that transformed not only her family, but the entire community around them. 2 years later, Sarah was finishing her work on the National Commission, having contributed to the creation of housing policies that benefited thousands of families across the country. She decided not to run for City Hall again, passing the position to a competent successor who would continue her projects. "It's time for me to dedicate myself more to my family and perhaps write a second book," announced Sarah during an interview about her decision to leave public life. "What would the theme of the second book be?" asked the journalist. "How to turn difficult personal experiences into tools to serve the community," replied Sarah. "Based on your own experience?" continued the journalist. "Based on the experience of many families I've met over these years. Every family has a unique story of overcoming that can inspire others," explained Sarah. At home, the family received the news of Sarah's political retirement with mixed joy. "We'll finally have more time together," celebrated Olivia, now a licensed architect working on affordable housing projects. "But we'll miss seeing you transform the city," admitted Emily, who had been promoted to regional public defender. "My transformation work doesn't stop. It just changes focus," clarified Sarah. "Now I want to dedicate myself to training other leaders who can continue this work." Brandon, who had become a father again, this time to a boy named Marcus in honor of his grandfather, fully supported his mother's decision. "Mom, you've already transformed more lives than anyone could expect. Now you deserve to enjoy the personal life you've built," said Brandon affectionately. "And we want Grandma to have time to play with us," added Grace, now 4 years old and very smart. Sarah laughed, realizing that the next phase of her life would be equally rewarding, but in a different way. 25 years after the flood, Sarah was completely fulfilled as a dedicated grandmother, mentor to young political leaders, and author of books about family resilience. Her second book, Resilient Families: How to Turn Crises into Opportunities, had become a national reference. "Grandma, tell the story of Grandpa Marcus's safe again," asked Grace, now 9 years old, during a rainy afternoon. "Once upon a time there was a family that thought they had lost everything, but discovered they had gained much more than they imagined," began Sarah, sitting next to her granddaughter. "How did they discover that?" asked the girl, even though she already knew the story. "When the water took away everything they thought was important, it revealed something that was truly precious, a gift of love that Grandpa Marcus had left to protect the family," continued Sarah. "And what was in the safe?" asked little Marcus, 3 years old, who was always interested in the story. "There was money, but mainly there was proof that we were loved and protected," replied Sarah. "And so you lived happily ever after?" questioned Grace. "We were happy not because of the money, but because we discovered we could be strong together and help other families be strong too," clarified Sarah. That night, Sarah wrote in her diary, "Marcus, today our grandchildren asked to hear the story of your safe again. Each time I tell it, I perceive new layers of meaning in the experience we lived. You didn't just leave us financial resources, but most importantly, you taught us that true love is the kind that continues to protect and guide, even from a distance. Our children have become people who dedicate their lives to protecting other families. Our grandchildren are growing up with solid values, and your memory continues to be a source of inspiration for all of us. The safe the waters revealed held much more than money. It held the future of love and service you dreamed of for our family." 30 years after the flood, Sarah was celebrating her 70th birthday, surrounded by a large, close-knit family. Brandon and Emily had married and had children. Olivia had married a fellow architect and was expecting her first child. All had built careers dedicated to the well-being of vulnerable communities. "Mum, do you realize your life has become a living example of how to overcome adversity?" said Emily during the birthday toast. "It wasn't just my life, it was our family's life. Each of you contributed to this story," Sarah corrected humbly. "But you were our leader and inspiration," insisted Brandon. "And Dad was our invisible foundation," added Olivia. "You're right. Marcus continues to be part of all our achievements," agreed Sarah. That night, after all the guests had left, Sarah sat on the porch looking at the stars. The house they had lived in for over 20 years had become a true home, full of happy memories and shared accomplishments. The empty safe remained on the living room shelf, but now it was accompanied by graduation photos, weddings, births, and professional achievements of every family member. It had become an altar of gratitude instead of just a memento. "Marcus, your family has multiplied and continues to grow. Your grandchildren and great-grandchildren will grow up knowing your values through us. The love you planted has turned into a leafy tree that provides shade and fruit for many people. Thank you for choosing to love me and for planning our future so carefully. The flood revealed your gift, but you are the gift that keeps on giving," Sarah whispered to the stars. A gentle breeze rustled the trees in the backyard, and Sarah felt the comforting presence of Marcus, approving all they had built together. End of story. Now tell me, what did you think of this story of overcoming? Sarah managed to turn a tragedy into a life of purpose and service. Do you believe it's possible to find strength in difficult times like she did? Leave your comment telling me if any part of the story moved you especially. And don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this one.